Good afternoon, Penn Staters, and thank you for joining us. I'm Liz King, Executive Director for Resource Development at the Penn State Alumni Association. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's virtual speaker session titled Lessons from Lincoln, Using AI to Build a Land Grant in a Phone. Live closed captions are available. You can access them by clicking the closed caption button at the bottom of the Zoom video window and then clicking Show Subtitle. You may also customize your caption view by clicking the stream text link posted in the chat. And we're live streaming today's presentation, which will be archived and available on our website. Today's guest, Dr. David Hughes, is fascinated by educational systems. He grew up as a poor kid in Dublin and was kicked out of school at 15. He clawed his way back into education to make it to some of the oldest and best schools in Europe and in the New World. But it is the upstart young educational centers of the United States land grants that fascinate him. He gave up his research career on zombie ants to evolve the model of Penn State and the land grants via AI for the world in the form of PlantVillage, an AI-enabled land grant in a phone that utilizes data sharing to help smallholder farmers across Africa, Asia, and the Americas adapt to climate change. Professor Hughes will discuss his vision for how Penn State can become the top university in helping feed a world of 10 billion people in a climate change world. Thank you for joining us, Professor Hughes.
Thank you so much indeed, Liz. Well, it's really a pleasure to be able to speak to you all today, and I'm particularly always keen to speak to the alum and sort of recount my different view of Penn State, really coming here as both an immigrant, but also as a person who didn't get educated in the agricultural land grant system. And so I really see this as just a jewel in the crown of education, as Liz was talking about, and a fantastic opportunity for the challenges that we face globally. So I'm here as the Doherty and Lloyd Hook Chair in Global Food Security. I'm also the director of the USAID Innovation Lab here at Penn State. And just want to declare a conflict, which are the founder of PlantVillage Plus, which is a private company, which is part owned by Penn State. And we'll get onto that later on. So I oftentimes start these off by an imagination game. So imagine a country where the average life expectancy is just 40 years old. And child mortality is extraordinarily high, with almost over 1/3 of kids dying before the age of 5. And less than 5% of people have access to indoor plumbing. A huge amount of your money is spent on food, and there's very little government help, and there's a lot of corruption in the system. So what impoverished country would you guess this to be? And the answer is America in 1855. And that is when we founded the Farmer School in Centre County. Michigan State also founded one. And then, of course, in 1862, through the Morrill Act, we established a system of applied universities across the country to help smallholder farmers, in that case, expand westwards, have profitable farming, and be able to then supply the growing cities of an emerging country like the United States. And as you can hear from the accent, and as Liz mentioned, I'm Irish, come from Dublin. And in 1847, we had our devastating famine, which had such a large effect on the situation in the US, with so many immigrants coming to this country. So this was my country in 1847. And as I traveled around the world and worked on rainforests, I very often encountered situations like this. So I conceived of PlantVillage back in 2010 when I was in Ghana. And unfortunately, very little has changed across Africa in the 15 years. We really are not moving the needle. We have oftentimes old women bent over with shovels or hoes, picking out tubers from the ground. In the case of Ireland, it was potatoes. In the case of cassava, it's very often in the case of Africa, it's very often cassava, and both of them are affected by diseases which reduce the amount of food that the people can have, as well as the livelihoods from selling the excess food. This, in fact, is a long-term stasis. So this is a friend of PlantVillage, the former US ambassador to the Rome-based agencies, Kip Tom, a 7th-generation Nebraska farmer. And he's showing a museum exhibit that he encountered in Zimbabwe and during his time at the United Nations. And it's 2,800 years of stasis. Incredible, incredible situations. Whereas in the United States, we've succeeded enormously in being able to advance true agricultural research and then commercialization of that. So would be an example of this. Also, incredibly abundant corn production in the US. And this is not uniformly spread. So the future is here. It's not uniformly accessible. So this anonymous woman on the slopes of Mount Kenya, who probably is dead by now, can be found all over the internet as multiple large agencies and charities use these examples, these pictures, to ask for money, basically. But for me, this is a picture that is shameful and one we should be seeking to eradicate as quickly as possible. Although we don't know her name, we do know this lady. It's Madame Felice, and she's beside Faith Aroni, who's the daughter of one of the farmers we work with. And Madame Felice has 5 children, 7 grandchildren, 1/4 of an acre of land on which she has to, really support that family, which is incredibly difficult. And she does all of that with a hoe. And so because of that inequality and lack of availability of technology, the idea for PlantVillage was to leverage AI in smartphones, like in this case, it's computer vision in the hands of Rosalind Okoche, who was one of our farmers with Emiliana. And then they're able to explain this. Now, historically, the way this has happened is that human experts would go around and help individuals diagnose problems. We don't have access to those human experts at scale in Africa. And so we do have access to smartphones. And so the idea was a smartphone could become as good as humans in diagnosing the problem. And in this case, for cassava, we benchmarked it, and it's twice as good as the available humans in the system. So, of course, we've all gone through this revolution in AI in the last 12 months with things like ChatGPT, and it's only going to get better. So it's really a promising future. But the challenge has always been, how do we bring AI to people who live in an analog world? So these people lack smartphones. They lack oftentimes feature phones, what's called dumb phones. And it's also a situation whereby they lack access to electricity. So multiple challenges. And we tend to do this in a patient way where we leverage young people who act as bridges for helping those farmers. And so we've scaled this PlantVillage youth model, which is now in 12 countries, over 270 people. And we built a series of tools. So very early on, back in 2018, we started building these tools for the United Nations because the UN is in all of these countries, and we wanted to work in partnership with them to get it out as quickly as possible. So this is Kip again, and this is the former Secretary for Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, and I took this picture in Rome at FAO when I was called back there to meet him in 2019. And so what Kip is doing is he's looking at the system here, which is the old system where they would be tracking locust swarms across the world. And you can see this more clearly. So a system they had built up over about 40 or 50 years, using records of people to be able to track and trace locusts as they spread. And of course, locusts are literally the biblical problem of creating situations whereby they should be controlled on, because if they don't, you have this massive widespread system. And actually, this came to pass when I met Sonny Perdue. It was the 20th of January. Sorry, actually, the 29th of January, 2020. And just at that time, this locust upsurge was happening in Kenya. And the locusts had come across from Ethiopia in December 2019, and they spread first time in 72 years. Locusts had come in, and massive swarms that were about 40 miles wide and would consume enough food in one day to feed a population of New York City. So huge, huge problems. The other problem was COVID. So COVID was declared on March 11th, 2020, and that prevented the movement of people from Europe, for example, to come in and track and trace, which was the predominant model. And so what we did was we leveraged our existing system of young people with smartphones, and we were able to scale that up to a locust crisis team. So we started off with 12 people, then 52 people, and then we educated the local governments, multiple of them, to scale up to about 16,000 people using our app across an area of land from West Africa, Mauritania, all the way to Nepal, about 25% of the world's land surface. We got money from Eric Schmidt of Google as a gift, and we were able to help UNFAO during the locust crisis save food for 40 million people at a value of $1.7 billion. So a tremendous success by showing how if we leverage young people with technology to track and trace an emerging problem, we can help solve that problem in a very, very fast time, and then also having all those necessary changes. And the way we did it was just sending these people out, finding the swarms, communicating that with airplanes, and those airplanes would spray the chemicals. But this can be applied to any crisis that you're faced with. And then Kip came back very kindly and was able to share an endorsement of why the land grants are so important here. Why, if we combine the land grant thinking of evidence-based decision making with new tools like AI, cloud computing, and satellites, we're able to deal with the problems. And he has been a champion of what we're trying to do here at Penn State ever since. So we really appreciate his enthusiasm. So one of the things that happened at FAO, and you saw that old screen that Kip was looking at, and this is Keith Cressman, the former Locust officer, they really jazzed it up. They made it nice, and they have a bunch of politicians here coming to see how nice this is, and so they can track it and trace it, and use the PlantVillage software and then show it on screens so we can have more effective decision making. So that's a really good thing. So what PlantVillage did was emulate that. So we're working, for example, in Tanzania on a viral disease of bananas. It's a huge, huge problem. And so we had this, really grotty old room that the government were not using. It was in a government compound as part of the government extension services. And they said, yeah, sure, you can use it. And the young people on our team, they went in, they spruced it up. And so now it's being used on a daily basis by government in Tanzania to track and trace the problem, in this case, the viral diseases. And you can see there's a map up there. Extremely low cost, especially when you have young people who are able to get these facilities for free, which is we find is happening more and more often. Here's another example of Malawi. So this is Benuit here, and Viridiana's over there, two of our young people. This is Kelvin. And so he's working with Malawi through a project supported by Norway called Madifis. And we're here in the Department of Agricultural Research Services. So we're helping them with the same thing. You can't fight the problem if you don't know where the problem is. So in this case, the PlantVillage cloud comes right down into these local government offices. And they're really proud of it. So favorably in being able to driving this forward, but then also work with the farmers and figure out where is the problem and how can they solve that. Here's an example in Nepal that's just kicked off about 2 weeks ago. The government here has given us this building for 5 years rent-free. This is just extraordinary. This ability to partner with young people and government in order to help farmers. And we want to have a lot of demonstration here, people coming in, learning about the problem, and then responding to it. Some of it's work in progress. This is the one from Uganda, where we have still being built, but really enthusiastic support by the government there. So these offices, these observatories are really great. And here's Old Main. So it's not a case of just helping in extension services, it's also education. So here we have to promote liberal and practical education. So a lot of what we also do is help government understand where the problem is, but also leverage this ability to work with farmers so we can then help educate researchers. So taking the benefits that we have at a university with a library system, which is the 7th best in the country, helping make access to software, to library services, ways in which we can build up the capacity of researchers. And of course, now we're seeing this revolution in AI. We can really imagine how the phone itself was able to act as a patient teacher that's scalable across hundreds of millions of phones. And so we should be able to teach not just the young people helping the farmers, but directly helping the farmers, and then also the cloud of research scientists who are studying problems both now and also into the future. We also work on TV. So we work on West Africa and East Africa, where we send out alerts. We take information in from NASA and NOAA and other sources, and we send out these alerts reaching over 14 billion people a week. A lot of it's also on these feature phones where we're sending out information, texts. A lot of farmers have these, and we can send out information on rainfall, for example. We've done this a lot in Kenya and Uganda. And then we also do in person. So we may be meeting across the 12 countries between 10 and 40,000 farmers every month, engaging with them patiently. None of this is new. This is what we have done in our 67 counties in Pennsylvania since the beginning of Penn State. Patient engagement with farmers where they are. Education is also for children, of course. A lot of our work is focused on kids, climate change clubs. Again, if you've ever experienced 4-H here in the United States, it's the same thing. A really critical way to help drive forward change is to educate kids who then go home and explain that to their parents. And so we might be educating them on tree planting, water retention, and other approaches to having better productive agricultural systems. In the course of doing this, we keep on finding new things. So this was Sabina, a young girl at the age of 7, who was not in school, and then she was going to be married off because the economic livelihoods of their parents and caregivers had collapsed. And we find this more and more. This was a large project in Kenya, and so with Kate Ott, a Penn Stater, now alum, we set up this charity. And so we now have about 13 or 14 girls. If you want to support that, you're welcome to. But we have these young girls that we're keeping out of marriage, but then also solving the inherent problems. So how do we make their families grow more food despite climate change? So we're not going to have it. And if you don't think that girl marriage is a problem, because maybe it's not something in your mindset, unfortunately, because of climate change across Africa, it is accelerating rapidly, unfortunately. Another way in which we're working with schools is, for example, this project in Ghana, leveraging AI. So there's about 70 million children every day across the world eating school meals. It's oftentimes the only food that they get in a day. And we're leveraging AI to track and trace that, because there's a lot of corruption in the system. We don't know if we're paying for the meals. Is it actually going to where it should be going? So this is a large project with IFPRI in DC, and then also the University of Ghana. We do this also in Vietnam and Sri Lanka, and we're able to diagnose the nutritional composition of this food as well as humans, but 200 times cheaper. So that's really, really exciting, because we can use these phones in schools, and we're just launching now across 11,000 schools in Ghana, which is about 4 million kids. Here's an example of this from Sri Lanka as well. So we're doing it in multiple countries. What's also cool about this, we developed this tool called Franny. You can actually use it every single meal, every single day. So every time you have a meal, your phone is beside you. And so we can now see that young girls, adolescent girls in this case in Vietnam, are able to use it across time. And we found that over 30 days, and we've even extended this to 60 days, they end up eating healthier diets. So that's really, really great. So we can see how the phone can help them move, because it's a non-judgmental tool that allows them to simply take a picture of their meal, look at their goals, and get towards the goals, instead of constantly shaming people on failure to control weight, for example. And so because of that, and we're also thinking about this new initiative in the United States, Make America Healthy, we're working towards thinking of ways which you can use this here in the United States, where the phone, which is ever present, can be an important tool to help people eat better diets. And we're really excited by this new collaboration that we're starting with the Food Commons here, and the chefs and the team involved, where we can start working with Penn State students to see how we have them help us get this better tool, a tool that can help them track and trace food and eat healthier diets over time. So the occasion here is in red because it comes from this quotation that I really like. I have liked since I first came here. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, we must think anew, we must act anew, we must disenthrall ourselves. So this is Lincoln's second inaugural address. And I think it's a critically important quotation for me because it tells us we have to do new things because the world is changing rapidly. And I think educational institutions have to think of ways that if this woman had a better tool, then she would have been able to live a more dignified life. Because the phone is not just something to make calls on, it's a magical money-making machine. Think of a fallow asset like a car, which is not being used. Add the phone and you get Uber, the largest taxi firm in the world. The empty house or the empty room in a house plus the phone is the largest hotel chain in the world, which is Airbnb. In our case, we think the farm plus the phone is the ability to create large companies like PlantVillage Plus or other companies which can capture and store carbon in the soils across Africa. And that's going to be a $1.2 trillion industry by 2050 because we need to remove billions of tons of carbon every year. And if you're in State College at the moment, if you're in Centre County, it is extraordinarily cold. Nothing is growing. But across the tropics, things are growing all the time. And so we can have year-round capture of carbon. And the way to do that is through technology. So this is the PlantVillage Plus model, the private company that we've spun out from the university. And this is a system whereby we can see what the farmers are ordering. We can have agents who are selling to them. They can grow more food. They can be happier, more profitable. But we can also capture the non-consumed part. So for every pound of corn that you grow in a field, there's about 1.5 pounds, 1.6 pounds which are not consumed. And that can be turned into a durable form of carbon that can be stored in the ground and sold to polluters in the global north. And so we're actually selling a wide range of products. We're selling seeds, fertilizer, things that help them protect against natural enemies, storage solutions. And if you are buying all of this in a recurring model, then we get to keep the biomass that we turn into this basically coal. We turn it into coal, we put it back into the ground. And as I mentioned, it's cold here, but it's not cold across the tropics. And so 87% of Africa is within the tropics. We can grow year round, and Africa is just enormous. So the potential to bring together these tens of millions of farmers and build this largest factory in the world, which is capturing and storing carbon, is what the world needs because as I mentioned, between 4 and 16 billion tons of carbon have to be removed every year from the atmosphere, or else we're in serious trouble. And so we've been working a lot on that as Penn State. And so the idea is to take young people or to keep young people like Rebecca, who was recently visiting us and from Malawi, engage them. She's currently working with research labs here. She's doing experiments on wood and termites in Malawi. Expose her to what we are as Penn State, what we've historically been, and then figure out ways in which we can act with young people like Rebecca, but also farmers like Consolata and Rosalind and others that we mentioned in order to do something wholly different and wholly new. And I think that's the promise and opportunity of the university. It's certainly what I gravitate towards and why I enjoy being here tremendously. And I hope it's something that has been resonating with you guys as alum and something that you can be involved in. So thank you so much indeed for your time. And I'm happy to chat about things that you think are really important for all of us together to make the impact that we need to make in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was incredibly fascinating. And I know that everybody who is on today and who may be listening to the recording in the future will find this really fascinating. So thank you so much, Dr. Hughes. There were some questions that did come in before you started your presentation. And just as a reminder, for those of you who are joining us live, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen where you can post any other questions that you may have. So we'll go ahead and start with some of the questions that came in ahead of time. And I apologize for any pronunciations that I don't get exactly correct. So this question is from Mary, and she is asking if this is available to all Penn State alumni in Cote d'Ivoire.
Sorry, did I miss the question there, or somebody's going to speak?
Oh, nope, that was for you. If PlantVillage is something that's available to all
Oh,
Penn
sorry.
State
Yeah,
alumni.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. So we're very present in West Africa. So we started our second country being Burkina Faso, and then also in Niger. We have partners in Cote d'Ivoire. Our deputy director of the Innovation Lab is from Burkina Faso. So absolutely, it's also in French. So in Cote d'Ivoire. So happy to work with any groups there, and we are already present in Cote d'Ivoire and working with people through what's called a West African Viral Epidemiology Network. But basically, this is a village. In a village, anybody is present and can be present.
Wonderful. We have a question from Jordan who is asking, are there opportunities available for non-Penn State students to get involved with PlantVillage?
Yeah, no, send me an email, and we can kind of explore that. It depends on, so the answer is yes, of course. Anybody can be part of it because it's a non-exclusive public good. It belongs to everybody. So depending on where you are, Jordan, and what you're doing, absolutely we can engage you. Um, we have some issues about, people volunteering time because of some of the rules and regulations at the university, but it's a public good that anybody can use for sure. And so happy to engage you, Jordan.
Sure. Another question from Fujiko. How does coffee farming affect farming communities and soil in general?
Um, Coffee farming itself is beneficial because it's a cash crop that brings in huge amounts of money into the area. We work on coffee farming in Uganda and Kenya and elsewhere. Um, so that's a real benefit for the communities because they can diversify their income. It can be problematic if they're doing that without the staples. So we've seen this in other places where the focus on the cash crop has led to a decline in the availability of staples. Um, Itself, it doesn't stand out as a crop that has a negative effect on soil compared to anything else. So the problem with African soils is they're extraordinarily old. They're older than the dinosaurs. Whereas soils in the Midwest, which have been such a benefit to the United States, have been there since the last ice age, 12,000 years ago. And so we have old degraded soils. So irrespective of what crop you're growing in Africa, coffee or cassava, you really need to put more nutrients back into the soil, which is a large effort of what we do. So I hope I've kind of captured the question, and please feel to jump in if I haven't.
Yeah, and I do believe that we're going to be sharing information for how to connect with you after this presentation for people who have additional questions or who may want to engage in a conversation with you further about this. There is another question from John who says he's on the board of a not-for-profit operating in Kenya. How do we have our folks access and expand use of PlantVillage?
Yeah, so it's available in the Play Store, so they can immediately use PlantVillage app on the Play Store, and then it already cover within that will be a lot of the AI systems that are already present. So no doubt, the farmers that John was talking about might be growing corn or maize, as it's called there, and other crops, so they can use that. There's also a feature called other crops, and so irrespective of the problem, they could upload a picture and say, "Hey, here's my problem." So we work very much in service. So whatever's the question, we try and answer it, we try and respond to people. So then that's a really good way. So simply answering the question that people have and then building up from there. So the app is already available. Depending on where they are in Kenya, we were at one stage in 22 counties out of the 47. So no doubt we're close by and we could engage those people, and especially if it's one of those alumni connections, because they're oftentimes really, really strong.
I love that what you shared, David, is so accessible and so that for, people who do have the smartphones and have the capability, that it feels like it's something that anybody could help impact.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We have a question, a live question from one of our viewers today. Kristen is asking if you can talk a little bit about the process involved in developing the AI tools.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's patient and with humility. So it's easy to get this wrong. So what we're essentially trying to do on first principles is take a human expert and put them in a phone. And the human expert, somebody that you might describe as being a plant pathologist, let's say they did their PhD at Purdue or Penn State or somewhere, they maybe have done 20 years of research after that. They've been postdocs and they're really experienced on a particular problem. Let's say that's viral diseases in corn. Now, the problem with humans is, especially human experts, is that they oftentimes don't know why they know something or have difficulty explaining it. And also, they tend to use lots of different sources of information. So, I know I'm in Florida today, therefore I expect to see this bunch of problems compared to Iowa or whatever's the case. And so this is why you have to be really patient developing AI systems with experts. You develop the first few steps and it's terrible. It's always terrible at the start. And then you work patiently with the expert to get the expert to say, oh, well, I can understand why it said that versus this. So what you don't want to do is give all the data over to a bunch of computer scientists who then go off and do something and then it has some embedded problems. So it's a patient, constant back and forth between the human expert who knows what the problem is and the AI engineer who builds the machine to replicate the expert. Now, the third part of that trinity is then the farmer, because here in the United States or in some high income communities in the global south, farmers may have access to solutions. But other farmers may not. So you want to be given the kind of advice that allows the farmer to act on what it is. So if there's a viral disease, maybe the best solution out there is to buy this disease-resistant variety, but maybe that's not available in the economic possibilities of that farmer. So it's very much a patient back and forth with the recognition that we can have really bad systems, they're just going to improve. The good news about AI is, as bad as you may find it today, and you may have used ChatGPT, etc., today is the worst AI will ever be. It will only ever become better going forward. And so that's a really hopeful statement because it means we can improve. So if we can continue this relationship with experts. Now, another question is, why would experts work with us? And the answer is Penn State. Because we are a university. We are, and particularly a type of university, a land grant, where there's all those checks and balances in the system. The viewers may know or may not know, but a few years ago, there was a new herbicide, dicamba, which was released by Monsanto. And out in the Midwest somewhere, it wasn't working as it was meant to do. It was certainly killing the weed, but it was sort of floating off into neighbors' fields and then having an effect. And then they said to the extension services, hey, what's going on here? And extension said, oh, let's look into that. And then some person at one of the universities wrote and said, oh, it's not working as it's meant to do. It's having a problem. And some senior official at Monsanto called up the dean and said, hey, these people are saying our product is bad. And the dean of the college, I really should look up which college it was, the dean of the College of Ag out in the university there said, well, what can I do? Because my dean at Penn State has no ability to tell me what to do. Neither does President Bendaputi. And if I say something is incorrect based upon scientific principles, that's the beauty and the opportunity of the system in which we work. So I think that's a really good lesson to understand why the land grant system, with its deep history in agricultural research and the checks and balances of constantly evaluating what is right and what is wrong, is so important in a climate change world where we're now 12 months above 1.6 degrees Celsius, where everything is new. So we have had the hottest year in 125,000 years and the coldest year for the rest of your life. And we invented agriculture 12,000 years ago. So there's not a human on the planet who knows how to grow food sustainably for the next 25 years. It's only an institution. And it's especially an institution who've been doing this since 1855. And this is why when I talk about Penn State, I'm so passionate about its potential to make a difference in the world going forward.
We are so proud of our alumni and our alumni network. And I think that what you're saying is a lot of what we talk about as a university, the impact that our alumni, that our vast number of alumni across the globe has, and has the ability to continue having as we move forward.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. We have another question from Kat. She is asking, where do you get the products that you sell to the farmers through the system? And do you have private sector partnerships in addition to the public ones?
We do have a lot of private sector. We, especially as part of the current and emerging threats of crops innovation lab, which is supported by USAID, a sort of major mandate there is to help the private sector grow. So there are lots of available seed suppliers or suppliers of products. In some cases, we make our own. So for example, the biological control of the caterpillar, the fall armyworm, that's something we developed out of research that was supported through the university and now is a commercial solution. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. If it's available, we use it. Oftentimes the problem is not the availability, but the access. These are incredibly rural, isolated communities. Transport is a huge issue. So we tend to work on ways in which we can make it available at low cost. And then also having technology where we could see, is the farmer getting the right thing? Because for every farm, we could understand its soil characteristics and sell the right product at the right time. So it's a bit of a mixed approach. Now, all of the plant villages that I mentioned, PlantVillage Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, etc., they're all private sector. They're all private, and at the moment they're funded by grants from Penn State. But now with this new company, PlantVillage Plus, they're going to come underneath the PlantVillage Plus umbrella. So PlantVillage Plus will be here in Happy Valley. So you got my T-shirt on, Happy Valley. And the idea is to mix Happy Valley and Silicon Valley, so AI and land grants, mix them together, and build that here in Centre County. PlantVillage Plus, Lavanya Bhupati is the CEO of that, just spun out from the university. The idea is we build a $1 billion company here in Centre County with a $1.3 billion R&D department called Penn State. And the idea is that as we are all trying to figure out how to do this, and I can't overstate how difficult it will be to grow food under climate change, but as we try to figure this out, we can leverage the power of the university. And it's going to be a completely new way of doing things. But I think in 10 years' time, we will look back and say, yeah, obviously leveraging a land grant to solve the world's problems is a smart idea.
Absolutely. So many resources associated with being connected with this university. So we have another question from Raquel. She first says, amazing job. So I wanted to share that with you. And then asked, can you expand on how you and your team and the donations are helping to free young girls from marriage?
Yeah, so in general, philanthropy is a massive catalyst. So we have raised a lot of money through the university and USAID, about $41 million. We started off though from philanthropy, the Hook Institutes. It was a $120,000 gift, so it was a large gift, and we got $120,000 of it to start. And so we then turned that into 41 million. So that was a 370-fold return. So philanthropy is a catalyst for other funds. Specifically on this issue, what we do is we encourage donations, and then we pay for the young girls to then go into boarding schools. So we take them out of their family environment because that's the environment that's putting them into marriage. And then we pay for their boarding fees, and we have somebody oversee them, and we have school uniforms and sanitary towels and everything else that they need, and then transport back and forth. But we also go to where the family are and solve the problem. So in the case of Sabrina's family, we bought about, I think, 20 chickens, and now there's probably 40. I think we 5, and now there's 40. And so in this case, they are selling chickens to other people. So that we're increasing their economic performance, so that when Sabrina does come back for, say, holidays, we don't have that, compounding problem is. So we use the money, and then Kate Ott, who is the head of the Village Youth Fund, you can see all the financials there. We're just tracking everything, and so we're kind of building up with the money in that way. But um, we've given a lot of money. Myself, my wife, and other people have given money at the university, but it's not enough. So the idea of Plant Village Plus, as we sell things, 10% of our profits will go to Village Youth Fund. That's the idea there. And so, but of course, in the interim, if you're willing, please do support young girls and keep them out of that misery.
I have to take a deep breath because I think that the work that you're doing is incredibly powerful, and I really like how you talk about where we are today is it's the least that we'll know about anything today, right? It's only going to grow, and I think that that's very powerful, and I think that that can be applied to so many areas of our lives and what we do, and what we as Penn Staters can contribute to the world. And so thank you for putting it in that perspective. I have a couple other questions for you. Not actually, we do have a couple more audience questions. So John had submitted one of the pre questions, and he has a follow-up. So John is saying it's a follow-up to his question submitted related to the girls. Global Give Back Circle does this in Kenya. And so he has reached out to Kate. And so he just wanted to share that with you. And then we have a question from, and I apologize if I'm saying the name wrong. I believe it's Rihanna. She says, thanks for the great presentation. Could you please expand more on the point you mentioned that African soil is old and requires more nutrients? Is this because of soil microbes? And is there any research on this?
Yeah, if you ever look at these pictures of soils across the tropics, they're oftentimes red, whether that's Brazil or Tanzania, etc. So one of the problems there is just this heavy rain across the tropics. And if you've removed the tropical forests, which were present beforehand, you get an awful lot of leaching. So the redness comes from high levels of iron, but a lot of the organic material has been leached out. So that's one of the problems, just heavy inundation of rain. And now under climate change, we get heavier rain. So the overall amount of rain hasn't changed, but you get heavier rain. So that's one issue. The issue in Ireland or Idaho is that, we had a 12,500 years ago, an incredibly large ice age or ice sheet coming down, and that brought down new soils and it mixed in. So we have incredibly rich, fertile soils here, which were brought down. And then, of course, when the ice retreated, we got these what are called alluvial plains. So we got a regeneration of the soils here across Europe and North America, relatively recent. But the soils in Africa have been degraded by heavy rains. The other issue is when you remove a lot of the trees and you put in planting, you suck out the nutrients. So if you keep on planting corn year after year and you're not putting in the nutrients, then you end up with a decline in soil health and you don't have organic carbon. So we can actually measure this remotely and see that it's incredibly low. So they need to rejuvenate their soils by putting in organic material. And then we also put in this thing called biochar, which is the carbon, and it holds the water in the soil. So we need to build up the soil health. But it's a combination of factors, but mostly it's because they're just really old and they've never been rejuvenated by ice ages.
Thank you. So I want to go back a little bit to kind of how you got connected with Penn State, how you ended up here, and I'd love to, and I think other people may be interested too, to hear a little bit about how you've changed your focus from research on zombie ants to doing the global food security work that you're doing now.
Yeah, so I came to the United States in 2018, just on what is called a Marie Curie Fellowship from Europe. I just wanted to see the US. I came to Harvard. I was very interested in I study ants around the world and fungi that manipulate ant behavior. Harvard is one of the best places in the entire world to study ants. There's a massive collection there. E.O. Wilson was there. I came to work with Naomi Pierce at Harvard. And so I was on a fellowship there. I was really happy and enjoyed it. And then while I was there, I knew Andrew Reid very well. We're both evolutionary biologists, and we've known each other from conferences across Europe. And he said, "Well, come down. I'm at Penn State. I'm at one of these land grants," and he had joined a few years earlier. And really, I just came down to give a talk, and then I was just blown away by what it is. You know, what it's a democratically accessible mode of education. And for somebody who didn't have democratic access to education because I was kicked out at the age of 15, it strongly resonates with me. So I also went to Oxford. I managed to get to really good places: Oxford, Copenhagen, Harvard, etc. And the problem I have with all of these places, and my son is at Oxford now, is they're inward looking. They sit around and they think about great thoughts, you know, the classics, humanities, etc., etc. And if you look at the New World, 1636, John Harvard, he didn't set up Harvard, but he was one of the early donors. But 1636, they formulated based upon Emmanuel College in Cambridge in the UK, and they wanted to replicate what they had in Europe. And it was fine, but it's not suitable for the purposes. And this land grant came about as a practical research university built upon the German Humboldt system. And so I just always like that. I like the fact that you educate the sons and daughters of farmers. I like the fact that you try and get stuff done. If you look at Baldwin Turner, one of the early advocates, the problem in the Midwest in Illinois was a lot of the soil was being degraded because the wind was blowing it out of the land, and they were planting these Osanje trees to reduce soil loss. It's just highly practical, highly directed, and equitable. And now it's changed. Now we're defined now increasingly as a university by not who we include, but who we exclude. We think our rejection rates are something to brag about. Same thing in the University of California system. I often criticize Penn State because it has this idea that when it grows up, it wants to be Princeton. And I think that is completely misguided. I think the beauty of the system is that you are practical. As to why I do what I do and why I gave up zombie ants, which I wanted to do since I was 8 years old, or I wanted to work in rainforest ecology since I was 8 years old, I feel that doing anything else is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Um, Anything else except fighting climate change and global food security is wrong, because you think now is bad. In 10 years time, what's going to happen is going to make World War II look like a walk in the park. Hundreds of millions of people will die. I mean, if you think of India, northern India, they just went through a period of about 120 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 weeks. This will just be months long. And so then there's also issues around access to food and availability and so on and so forth. So it will be the defining goal or activity going forward. But that's why I gave zombie ants, and that's why I'm here at Penn State, and that's why I do what I do, because it's a village, and we should be doing stuff for other people and in the service of others. That's a happy life.
Yeah. Well, from everything that you've shared with us today, I think that Penn State is very lucky to have you leading this charge. I have a couple more quick questions, and then I think we'll get wrapped up for the day. Does your research align with the Penn State Climate Consortium, which is coming up in May of this year?
Yeah, we've taken part in two of their things, and we were present at one. I think what they're doing over there, Laura Fowler and Eric Schmidtwig, is really, really excellent. They're bringing together a lot of people, a lot of attention, and they have sort of an interdisciplinary framework. So we really enjoy taking part of that. And then there's other people like Bruce Logan here, who's like a world expert in understanding our various balances. So I think a lot of that is extremely fertile ground for the stuff that I'm interested in doing, because you can reach out to one of those experts. I just showed a picture of Rebecca on the staircases. She's working with people at Charlie Anderson's lab and others, which is part of that climate consortium. So I think that's great. We need to keep on doing research at the same time applying solutions. So climate consortium is great for that regard.
Super. couple questions about alumni and how you may be interacting with alumni. Are you hearing anything specific from alumni that reinforce that they understand the importance of your research?
No. And I think it's the failure of the development program of Penn State in the way in which it corrals alumni because it wants to, get a ready input for certain things. I think we could do a much better job of alumni engagement. It's the largest alumni network in the world, not just in terms of leveraging them to help us get to where we want to be, but if those alumni are in Cote d'Ivoire or elsewhere, they can be massive voices. And I think a little bit the problem. So a little bit the problem of the land grants and Penn State is the understatedness of the whole thing. So America is the most bombastic country in the world. Number one at everything except humility. Just across the boards. That's my impression as an immigrant. Okay, except when it comes to a singular success story you have, which is the land grants. So we've already solved the problem of the Dust Bowl, the Green Revolution. That came out of the land grant research. And for the future, we need to have the land grants solve these problems. But when it comes to really extolling our virtues and talking about it, we don't do a good job. And I've educated a lot of students here. I will ask the question to 100 students in a class, hands up, who knows Norman Borlaug? Nobody. He's in the rotunda of the Capitol, Iowa. A person, scientist, won the Nobel Prize in 1972 for saving 1 billion people from hunger. Hands up, who knows Kim Kardashian? 100 hands. And so we've done a terrible job of educating people on what we are. And, I declined to say we are Penn State earlier because people think we're a football team, but a university attached. And while football is fine and dandy and nice to have, the real success of leveraging our alumni is telling the great stories of success in the past, because they're the ones who are going to carry us forward into the future, because we don't know what we're doing in this future. And science and education and research, the very definition of the land grants, is what's going to carry us forward. And that's the end of my TED Talk.
Okay, last question, and we're going to wrap up. And I think this is, a great follow-up to what you just shared. How can alumni learn more and access additional resources about what you're working on?
PlantVillage.psu.edu is our website. There's also PlantVillage TV, which is a great source. Just type in Google PlantVillage TV and you'll see lots of great videos of what we do. We're on LinkedIn, PlantVillage on LinkedIn, on Twitter and other sources. We've taken a break for January because we're focusing on other stuff, but we'll still start up putting content out there. So we have a large media team who's putting out some information. We have a lot of documentaries and content, and you'll find those. And if you don't find them, just send us a message and we'll try and get them for you. But it is a village, and it's not a chiefdom. It's not an empire. It's a village, and anybody can come and go from the village. That's the beauty of the system. And so we'd be very welcome to have, especially if you're in an area that has knowledge. I mean, we need accountants. If you know something about that, or we need people who understand legal proceedings and so on and so forth. There's loads of ways in which you can contribute. Or just ask us a bunch of questions and then we can answer those, and they will probably help somebody else in the future. So yeah, plantvillage.psu.edu, PlantVillage TV on YouTube, and LinkedIn and stuff.
Super. Thank you very much. I think it's fair to say that it takes a village, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Super. Well, David, thank you so much for your time today. This is all the time that we have for this virtual speaker session. I want to thank you so much for joining us, David, and I want to thank everybody else who tuned into today's virtual speaker session. As a reminder, everybody who is viewing can view a full listing of all of our events online and in person at alumni.psu.edu/events. I do think that based on what you shared with us today, David, that it's apropos to close with a line from our alma mater, and that would be for the future. So thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate everything that you shared with us today.
Great. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Lovely being here.